Forgotten Realms' Demon Stone sees you taking control of the gloomy and brooding fighter Rannick, and after a little while of progressing through the initial stage, you'll find yourself with two other characters as well, Zai, a Dark Elf rogue, and Ilias, a human sorcerer. Each character has some very unique aspects, both with how they control and their approach to each battle. The ability to freely switch between each of them is a real plus when it comes to combat, and allows you to take advantage of each of their strengths when the time calls for it. If there's a large horde of monsters, the warrior can lead the charge, but if there are monsters sprawled across a large area, the sorcerer can shoot them up with his magic. And this constant juggle between each of your party members as you make your way through each level is what makes the gameplay so fun, mainly due to the huge variety of enemies which are all weak or resistant to a specific type of attack. Further expanding on this are the team attacks, which allow you to call for assistance when you're in a tight spot, and providing you've taken out enough enemies to see your hero gauge reach its peak, you can then unleash a devastating ability which sees all of your party coming together to dish out the damage. A real sense of progression permeates throughout Demon Stone thanks to the various types of loot you can pick up as well, mainly gold being the most valuable, which can then be traded in for more weapons, armor and items between missions. Demon Stone is a fascinating game with a range of combat options, entertaining bosses to overcome and foes to battle, and even though it didn't really accomplish anything that was at all new from Stormfront's past efforts, the battles usually include some sort of objective which helps to keep things from getting stale. Coupling this with the immense amount of items and collectibles, your first run through the game will be just as enjoyable as your last. If you're a long-time fan of the channel, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of Macross, and Dimensional Fortress is hands down one of, if not the best entry of games to come out of the franchise. The story follows the show and movies very closely, and allows you to choose from two branching paths or sequences based on both. There's a total of 20 missions to undertake, each offering up different objectives to accomplish, all the while mowing down the seemingly endless waves of enemies that come your way. Your ship, or Valkyrie, is of course able to transform into each of its three forms at any time, and it's up to the player to decide which form best suits the circumstances they find themselves in. Naturally, each has their own pros and cons, and this causes the gameplay to drastically shift in the blink of an eye. At first you'll be soaring through the skies, and then suddenly find yourself running across the ground and quickly switching back. This forms the core of the frantic gameplay that Dimensional Fortress excels at producing. Of course, you can unlock new Valkyries to use by completing particular tasks or finishing a stage with a good score, and for any fan of the series, this game is a dream come true, featuring nearly all of the machines from the franchise and allowing you to jump into them and play around with each of their unique strengths and weaknesses out in the field. Visually, Dimensional Fortress is a real showcase for the PlayStation 2 hardware. The amount of things going on at once on screen is at times overwhelming, but the frame rate never stutters and manages to keep up with the hectic action, all the while displaying your Valkyrie, each enemy and surroundings in remarkable detail for its time. If you consider yourself any sort of Macross fan at all, you owe it to yourself to track this game down. Mystic Heroes takes place in ancient China, where you control one of four heroes in a quest to save the world from complete destruction at the hands of the ultimate evil, Emperor Kang. After being sealed away long ago, but somehow managing to escape and continue to work on his twisted plans for the world, it's your job to bring him down. Now, for anyone familiar with the Dynasty Warriors series, you'll feel instantly at home, and in addition to mashing the hell out of the X button to hit enemies with your weapon, you also have several magic attacks at your fingertips. You can target several enemies from a distance and launch projectiles at them, or you can use your magic to light your weapon on fire, making it deal more damage to the enemies it hits. As you would expect, combos are a huge aspect of the gameplay, and the higher you score, the more experience you'll receive. You can then level up some of your magic moves, making them more potent, as well as being able to equip more powerful weapons. These usually have different magic types associated with them, such as fire, ice, lightning and wind, which all have their role to play on the field during battle. You can freeze enemies in their place or even confuse and slow them down, which adds some actual thought to your actions instead of mindlessly swinging away for hours on end. Visually, Mystic Heroes is a bit of a looker. Every character is intricately detailed, from the main heroes to the grand and imposing bosses, as well as the low-level grunts that litter the field. As you fight your way past hundreds of enemies, from undead samurais to mighty shogun warriors, the frame rate does a respectable job of keeping up with the action, allowing you to see what is going on and plan ahead accordingly without any interruption. Mystic Heroes is the literal definition of a hidden gem, and still to this day hasn't received as much attention as it deserves. If you're a fan of hack and slashes, this game is for you. Predator: Concrete Jungle is one of the better games to come out of the franchise, and even though it does have some issues, it's a game that actually makes you feel like a predator due to all of the incredible abilities you can earn throughout the game. The story is somewhat bare bones and isn't really anything to write home about, but it does a good job of setting up the world and giving the player an objective to work towards. After 100 years in exile, the Predator is called back into action. Upon leaving valuable technology behind the last time he was here, it has now become commonplace throughout the world, and it's your task to get rid of it. The game is largely split up into a series of levels that primarily take place throughout a sprawling cityscape, and each mission offers up plenty of variety, from assassinations to protection and fetch quests, and thanks to this, there's always something new to do in the game, which never feels stale as you make your way towards the end. Now, what would a Predator be without a series of badass weapons and abilities? In the first few levels, you get a combat stick, the shoulder cannon gun, spear gun and wrist blades, and as you work your way up, you get more weapons like the glaive and mauler, as well as some of the more valuable abilities like thermal vision that all come together to offer up a serious amount of options when dealing with the many enemies you'll find throughout the city. Just like the films before it, this game is gruesome, and it's not afraid to have some fun with it, from kicking people off buildings to slamming them into walls head first, all gloriously animated. You're bound to have a laugh or two as you mop up each target, and this is where most of the enjoyment of the game comes from the visceral combat to the nigh on endless amount of weapons and abilities. It actually feels true to the source material, and only falls short due to some rather bizarre design choices such as no checkpoints and a really steep learning curve. But overall, it's nothing that ruins the game as a whole. Based on the anime of the same name, Saint Seiya the Sanctuary follows the events of its source material to a T, and sees you taking up the fight as one of several characters in a beat-em-up / fighting game that mixes the best from both genres into one. What makes the game so compelling is the easy to pick up and learn controls that only consist of 2 attacks, a block, a dash button, as well as one being reserved for your special ability. Many characters have a choice of 3 specials to perform of varying strengths, depending on how long the button is held down for, and here is where the game shines, as each are beautifully animated and provide a sense of epicness to even the most mundane of encounters throughout the game. Now, as I mentioned, Saint Seiya is largely split up into 2 separate styles of play, the first being a beat 'em up which sees you roaming the map and mopping up enemies, and the second a standard 3D fighter. There's not too much that differs with each approach, but I personally found the one-on-one fights far more engaging than when facing a crowd. Here, in these moments, you can get to grips with the mechanics in play, such as parrying and knockbacks, which have the potential to turn the tide of a battle in the blink of an eye. When it comes to presentation, this is by far one of the better looking games on the PS2. There's a huge array of lighting effects during battles, most notably when performing your strongest moves, known as Big Bang attacks, that do a great job of making each fight as flamboyant as they are in the series. The backdrops of all the various stages are just as compelling, and it's clear that a lot of love and passion went into the game, with the developers going the extra mile to make sure nearly every aspect of the world feels authentic. If you're a fan of the anime or several of the Dragon Ball Z games on the PlayStation 2 for that matter, then Saint Seiya will provide just as an exhilarating experience to jump into. The PlayStation 2 was no stranger to quality 3D platformers, with plenty to offer such as Ratchet & Clank to more obscure titles like Tokobot. There was always plenty to play, but one game that never got its chance in the spotlight has to be Poiny's Point. If you're fond of bizarre Japanese games, then this one is right up your alley, as it presents what is by far one of the most strangest but endearing games you'll find on the PS2. It all centers around Poiny, who lives an idyllic life in Jellytown, surrounded by strange, mood-altering bubbles called Point. After falling into the sewer and joining forces with a mysterious living Point, it's up to Pointy to defend his town from the evil that threatens to destroy it and restore the citizens in and around the town to their rightful senses. Now, words cannot describe how absurd this game is, and despite its rather childish appearance, there's plenty of depth and challenge lurking beneath the surface. The basic idea of the game is to tackle each level you'll find throughout Jellytown, which serves as a sort of hub area. The mind-altering points play a key role in overcoming the enemies that do anything to stop you in your path, and by altering their emotions, it opens the way forward. The game isn't too challenging in these moments and only begins to hit its stride during the various boss fights that litter the adventure, and here you'll have to take everything you've learned so far in the field and apply it to some rather tricky situations that demand a full understanding of how the points work. It's all relatively simple, but the gameplay is only half of the equation when it comes to Pointy's Point, as the world and characters that inhabit it are downright hilarious. This is truly a one-of-a-kind adventure, and if you're like me and enjoy the likes of Katamari Damacy or even Parappa the Rapper, you'll find plenty here to love. Contra Shattered Soldier sees you blasting your way through several stages of enemies, mowing down endless soldiers and out-of-control bosses that will both frustrate you and keep you on your toes all at the same time. As you progress through the stages, you'll notice that there are lots of opportunities to jump and evade each enemy attack, which come from all directions at once, requiring you to constantly be ready to dodge as well as reply in kind with your own barrage of bullets. In true Contra fashion, you've got plenty of ways to do this, with a huge variety of weapons ranging from your standard machine gun to the ever popular flamethrower. There's 6 in total, with 3 of them being automatic, and the others requiring you to charge them up before letting off a shot. These weapons offer up far superior firepower, which adds a sense of strategy to the otherwise hectic gunplay, allowing you to switch between weapons on the fly. For example, a group of enemies might be better dealt with by a swarm of homing missiles, but larger enemies will soak them up, so it's a good idea to gauge each situation as it plays out and alter your tactics accordingly. You'll notice at the top of the screen that your hit rating is constantly conveyed, which awards you an accuracy rating at the conclusion of each stage. The more accurately you play, the higher your grade, and the better your grade, the more post-game unlockable items you'll receive. One aspect of the game that is bound to impress anyone are the visuals, and especially the designs of each boss you'll end up fighting throughout each level. With the excitement and good looks that these massive beasts bring to the game, it's a good thing that there's plenty to overcome. After the rather disappointing 3D games before it, Shattered Soldier was a return to form. If you're a fan of the series though, this is the Contra you know and love, so don't let anyone put you off from playing it. Magna Carta Tears of Blood is one of those games you're either going to absolutely love or completely hate with a passion. Admittedly, there are a few issues that stop it from achieving greatness, but for some players they may be easy to overlook. By far the best characteristic of the game is its story, which follows the journey of Callens, a young man enrolled in a mercenary group that's responsible for dealing with the issues of the kingdom that the normal inhabitants can't muster themselves. Now of course RPGs live or die on their battle system, and this is where most of the divisiveness about the game comes from. First off, the world of Magna Carta is based around chi, basically energy or elements. There are 8 types of chi, and each character can learn different styles based on different elements. In order to attack, there has to be a certain amount of chi in the area that corresponds with the element of the style the character is using. I know it sounds confusing, but once you use it for a while, it does get easier. It's all presented in real time, and is all beholden to a series of inputs that are required to perform each attack. A small ring appears upon executing a move, and if you time the inputs correctly, it can result in a damage boost, which really helps out during some of the more difficult encounters you'll find yourself in throughout the game. When outside of battle, you'll find yourself visiting a series of locales from dark and dank caves to bright and colourful towns full of NPCs waiting to guide you on your path. Here you'll find many of the game's side quests that do a good job in prolonging the adventure, but in meaningful ways that actually add to the overall story Magna Carta is trying to convey. Overall, Magna Carta Tears of Blood won't be for everyone, but if you're like me and enjoy RPGs, there is plenty here to sink your teeth into. For anyone familiar with Techno's Deception series, Trapped is the sequel to the PlayStation 1 title Kagero Deception 2, and carries over many of the mechanics and aspects that made those games so great, all the while offering up several changes that helped it stand out against them. You fill the role of Princess Allura that presides over a failing kingdom whose king has mysteriously died. The queen blames it on you, and you're forced to take up the fight with the help of a fiend to save yourself. Now, the battling system is all based around the ability to place traps. You can use anything from giant buzzsaws to bombs and oil pots, and to defeat enemies quickly, you must set up these traps to go off one after the other, as well as the traps you set yourself. The rooms and courtyards you fight in have their own set of traps you can trigger. These are all useful in setting up chain combinations and doing damage to late game and boss characters who have strong resistances to many of the traps you can set. You can only trigger these traps while running away from the enemy, so you basically have to stand between them and the trap while you wait for them to enter the activation zone. After you successfully take them down, you're rewarded with currency, which can then be spent on acquiring more options and upgrading the traps you currently have. But if the game has one thing going against it, it would have to be its rather short playtime. Luckily, it offers up a series of extras such as 4 separate endings and plenty of unlockable content to help pad out the experience. On the whole, if you can look over some of the more negative aspects of the game, then Trapped offers up one of the most unique experiences you'll find on the PS2. Tekken has always been synonymous with the PlayStation brand, and after the huge success of the series up until the PlayStation 2, Namco decided to branch out and create a spin-off starring one of the more popular characters, Nina Williams. The story sees her infiltrating an illegal fighting contest on a ship with the help of MI6. The main goal is to dismantle a mafia-like organization that are responsible for a rather huge explosion out at sea. To be fair, it's pretty mediocre at best, but at least the gameplay helps alleviate any issues with the narrative. Now, instead of taking the form of a fighting game like the series before it, Death by Degrees is a beat-em-up, with all of the action taking place from a third-person view, and the flow is similar to most in the genre, meaning that you'll be running around, kicking ass while looking for keys, finding clues, and solving puzzles to advance further in each mission. What helps differentiate it from others on the system is the rather unique leveling up and point system that sees you becoming stronger over the course of the game, with more health and access to more focus points which serve as the means to carry out your special attacks. The abundance of moves to buy and learn is a real positive when it comes to the gameplay, as it always feels like the game is dishing out something new, and furthermore mixing up each encounter as a result. One of my favourite features of the game, however, are the many costumes you can earn throughout your playtime, as well as a few risque options that are bound to raise an eyebrow or two. By no means is it a perfect game, but in my eyes it achieved what it set out to do. I'd say there's plenty here to get stuck into. Well, that's another video in the bag. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos that release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials, which are linked below, to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skilljim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Alfred, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.